Confidence is not loudness, it's congruence. So, today I really want to speak about confidence and things that you don't do when you are confident. And this is coming from someone who, for a lot of time, thought I was confident, especially because so many people said I was. But I realized only after reaching a higher point of it that I didn't actually have this level of confidence I thought I did. And once I've established more of it, I realize there are certain things that when you are truly confident in who you are, you don't do. And I think it's worth talking about because I want you to be confident as well. Mm. On another note, this matcha is so delightful. It's stunning. I made this vanilla matcha, so good. And how cute is this cup? It's so sweet. It's got a little bow. I love adding girly things. It just makes me feel happy. So I feel like life is so serious and stuff. So when you have cutie, girly, whimsical things around, it just makes things feel so much better. Mm. Confident people don't over explain themselves. Now, of course, all of the following points are going to be based on personal perception and life experience of my own. In meeting people that I truly can deem confident, as well as my own character development over time, I can say that the following points that I'm going to mention really do justify what I believe to be confidence. And so, I've been someone that many people have labeled confident. I've gone to different social groups, different clubs, like hobbies, and obviously different workplaces to have been given similar compliments in terms of I feel very sure of myself. I give off a very confident aura. And that being said, at times some people are even intimidated by it. But the key thing that I've noticed in myself is that there have been points where, even though it seemed like I was confident, after reaching the point that I'm at now, I knew that wasn't confidence. It was maybe a gateway there, but it wasn't fully polished. And these are the things that I dropped in order to feel better and more confident in myself as an individual. So, over explaining was a very big thing that I used to do. Over explaining is often a fawn response. It comes from fear of being misunderstood or rejected. And for me, that was most certainly a trauma response because I had a very complex childhood dynamic and I was made to feel like, in order to keep myself safe and again feel very lovable, I had to explain myself to the T to make sure that nothing could be misinterpreted and that I was safe. This can also come from bad experiences romantically, which again I've also experienced. And you just know for yourself that you need to keep yourself safe by over explaining. But when it comes to survival techniques or things that may have helped you in life before, you need to sometimes appreciate these belong in the old chapters, but you don't need to carry the weight of them now. I feel like when you over explain, it signals that your default position is wrong unless you justify it and explain yourself. And we want to shift that away from, no, we're not going to be doing that. I trust myself enough to know that I can relay my message with confidence and know that more or less most people are going to get what I'm talking about. And if someone doesn't, that's more of a them problem, not a my problem. And if you know me, you know I love bringing some psychology into this because for me, during my healing and character development, it really was something that helped because when you know that there is science and there is proven psychology points that can actually develop this and help you heal and help you live the best life possible, then why would you stop yourself? And again, I'm talking about these things because I want you to be confident. And so many people waste their lives developing experience and like essentially living through things that could have been avoidable had people discussed about these topics. And again, that's why I love having this social era of kind of the internet because whilst it's got a lot of downfalls, there are some positive stuff and I want more positivity in the world. So yeah, but the psychology, obviously, we've spoken about the trauma response. There's a guy called Pete Walker. He's got a framework around it if you want to look into that more. Then it's attachment anxiety, but I feel like that kind of it relates to both anxious and avoidant attachments because essentially you're jumping to the worst case scenario, and that goes into one of the other points I raised about cognitive distortion, where essentially you are mind reading and catastrophizing even before something's happened. So It's just the responses are different for anxious and avoidance. So anxious tend to pull in and you'll over explain yourself, whereas avoidance tend to shut off and pull away. And obviously those show up in relationship dynamics and what have you, but we're not talking about attachment styles today. We're talking about confidence. But it's just interesting to know that it can impact you in so many ways. And essentially, the other point was there's a social conditioning, especially in women, to over explain yourself, to be agreeable, to be accommodating. And we don't need to be doing that anymore. I feel like we've moved past those times where we can just accept the fact that we don't need to over explain ourselves. The need to over explain reduces as your self trust increases. I believe the biggest thing that you could do for yourself is shift things from I hope you approve to I trust my reasoning. And that mindset shift can really help you appreciate that as long as you're doing the inner work, you're constantly working and improving on yourself, you don't need to be seeking out all this validation from the outside source. And you yourself are good enough as you are. Another point I felt was important was confident people do not chase reassurance repeatedly. Now, I'm going to caveat this with the fact that it's completely human to seek out reassurance and validation, especially from our loved ones around us and in relationships as well, but not repeatedly. And this is the emphasis, not repeatedly. It's a bird outside. How pretty. Oh, it's having a drink. Dip, dip. And what I mean by this is no double, triple, quadruple texting. So if you've sent a message, good, you've got your point across. But when people are almost anxiously going da 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 with loads of different points, you are looking for that reassurance from someone when actually it should be coming in from yourself. And then another point that I wrote was rereading conversations obsessively. I'm not so guilty of this, but I have seen it happen for people. And I feel that when you are quite secure and confident in yourself, you're not going to be doing that. You're not going to be looking for reassurance in the micro crumbs that could exist somewhere. And I feel people reread messages a lot and obsessively for that. They're seeking out these crumbs of approval through potentially having missed a point somewhere. But you don't need to do that. And I feel that you can read something at face value, accept it for what it is. And unless it's your job as a lawyer or someone who needs to analyze or research things, you don't need to microanalyze every detail. Fishing for compliments. So when you're fishing for compliments, you are actively looking for that validation and reassurance, but in a way that is external. And I think the key thing about this is that it's external validation you're seeking, not internal, which makes you a weak point, an easy target. And you don't want to do that because if someone takes away whichever source of external validation you have, then your character crumbles. And as long as the internal validation heavily is stronger than what is external, then you're not going to be an easy target. You're not going to be easily broken because someone's taken away your external source of validation. Another point was asking questions of reassurance. And this doesn't always have to look like do I look pretty? Does this look nice? Do you still love me? It can be more things like, are you mad at me? Are we okay? And when you are looking to essentially walk on eggshells voluntarily, by asking these questions, you are seeking out this reassurance that you should just be getting yourself. Because of course, if someone was mad at you, they should be grown up enough and mature enough to communicate that with you. And if you're in a relationship where that's happening constantly, you should accept the fact that this is probably not a healthy dynamic to exist in within the first place. But yes, so the psychology that I found behind this was intermittent reinforcement creates anxious attachment loops. Dopamine reward cycles from validation, external locus of control versus internal locus. Essentially, you need to shift your confidence from external validation to internal. And when you do all of these above mentioned behaviors, you're conveying to yourself, as well as whoever is on the outside, that your biggest form of validation and reassurance comes from the outside, not the inside. And there was this beautiful metaphor that I have fallen in love with. I love metaphors about a butterfly garden and butterflies. So if you want to catch a butterfly and you spend your time chasing it and trying to engage it, the chances are, even if you do catch it, it's not going to be flying in the most beautiful way possible. It's not going to be this something that you can truly enjoy. Whereas if you work on your garden and your space and you plant the right plants and you do everything that would attract a butterfly naturally, you're probably not just going to get the one butterfly you wanted, but loads of butterflies. And love that metaphor because it shows that the things that you really want come from within and working on yourself rather than trying to chase them and get them all from the outside. And that's not to say that, of course, you shouldn't go out and chase your dreams and do the work, but a lot of the time it comes from self improvement. And this also relates to validation because when we're seeking out things from an external source, you're spending more time chasing that external individual item, whatever it may be. Whereas, like the butterfly garden, if you work on your own space, you're likely to attract the exact thing that you wanted as well as more, which is a great thing. Confident people self soothe first. They don't outsource emotional regulation. It's important to learn to sit in discomfort rather than chasing regulation because at the end of the day, life is not always going to be comfortable. There are going to be just like uncomfortable moments. But that being said, when you learn to confidently be yourself, even in those moments, it's very difficult for anyone to knock you off who you are because you're being your authentic self. But the more you rely on external sources for anything, validation, hope, reassurance, whatever it may be, you are that much more easy to knock off. And why would you want to give somebody else that power? And I think the whole thing about confidence that people admire so much is the fact that it almost has this aura of power. And why is that? Because you almost become this untouchable entity because you're so secure in yourself that no one can take it away from you because the only one that can take it away from you is yourself. Hence why I say you really need to try and minimize that reliance on external validation and reassurance and shift it to you. Of course, it's important to get it from time to time from the external world, especially from our nearest and dearest, but it should not be the 100% thing. And at the end of the day, you're never going to feel 100% confident if all of it comes from the outside source anyway. This is a really big point that I wanted to talk about, and it was confident people don't stay where they're tolerated. So, staying in friendships where you shrink, dating potential rather than reality. And I really want to ring a bell for this one. I do have a bell, but I just don't want to get it. But this is so important. We're all so guilty of this most of the time. I think I've not met one individual that not at one point in their life have they done something for potential rather than the reality that exists, especially when it comes to dating. But yeah, and then remaining in rooms that subtly disrespect you. I had this with one of my old jobs I did where I had potential that was way more than the room and they all knew it, but they were subtly trying to push me down because some of these guys were older and they had made some mistakes and it was easier to target the younger workers that like you sit there and you're like, yeah, I can't stay here because you just know that you're being disrespected left, right, and center. And you have to respect yourself enough to appreciate this environment is not for me. My favorite thing that I've heard about toxic environments is that you are more likely to be poisoned by a toxic environment than heal the environment itself. So sometimes the best thing that you can do for yourself is get up and leave said environment. It's like trying to go to Chernobyl and fix it. Of course, it's a noble idea, but the reality is the radiation will probably kill you before you save the space. Yeah. So, in psychology, it's a self worth theory. We accept treatment aligned with our self perception. Attachment trauma can normalize inconsistency. Cognitive dissonance. He's good deep down inside versus actual behavior. And unfortunately, I've gone through all of these things to know that when you get onto the other side, you feel so much better as an individual. You feel freer, you feel better, you feel happier. That I want whoever is going through that to realize you don't need to go through that. And the faster you get to the other side, the better. But of course, healing, we need to normalize, is not a linear process. And once you escape whatever it is that has forced you into survival mode or any of these mentioned like things, you also have a process to heal and recover. And that's going to look different every day. But yeah, I feel confident people prioritize behavioral evidence over fantasy. And this line should hit hard because when you are confident and secure in yourself, You are going to look at someone's behavior, not the fantasy of them, not the words they talk about, because everything should align in how they behave towards you. And I'm very guilty of listening to words and maybe getting some breadcrumbs of behavior and falling for that, accepting that, and not appreciating the reality at hand, which a lot of the time has not met up to any form of acceptable standard. So, yes, but I think the big thing and big take home is you're not going to stay in environments that push you down. You're not going to stay in toxic environments. And again, it's such a hard pill for so many people to swallow, including myself. You really need to let go of that potential and just see the reality. And this could be in everything, but again, most of the time it's dating. You see someone, you see how great they are, you go, oh, how wonderful are they? And they give you breadcrumbs and hope, and you're sitting there going, great, I see this future. You start imagining it, and it turns into this beautiful fantasy, and the reality is very different. And you need to almost become so cold and sharp with yourself to be strict enough to go, what is the reality? Have they done X, Y, and Z that I imagine them to do in the future? And if the answer is no, pull yourself back into reality. Give yourself that reality check and go, nope. And this is, I think, a very confident thing to do, because even though it might not be what you want, you're giving yourself the decency and respect to go, boundary up until they've earned it. No. Confident people don't laugh when they're uncomfortable. So, this is something that is more subtle, but I'm hoping will resonate with people, because oftentimes they're not. When you're put into an uncomfortable situation, especially women, but men do this too, you sort of are expected to be agreeable, make things socially smooth over. And most of the time that happens with a sort of soft, awkward. Yeah. But when do we do this? Normally, when someone has said something so diabolical, so inappropriate, or uncomfortable that you're just there like. But actually, I have now shifted this over into almost giving someone this death stare, and I just go, did you actually just say that? And I don't say anything, I just stare. And that sort of offers the message that I'm not going to smooth this over. What you just said or did was not okay. And yeah, it just delivers the point a lot more effectively. But what I did write down was that essentially most of the time we do nervous laughter when someone crosses a boundary. And that essentially shows that you're smiling through disrespect. Why would you want to do that? And again, we're sort of expected to do that as a survival technique, and there is science behind this. But we should not soften our tone when we disagree. And again, so psychology shows that as humans, our social survival instinct is there, and it kicks in through laughter by trying to be like, like actually, it's all good. We're not going to create an argument here. And it's very much gendered conditioning. So this does more so fall onto women, but again, caveating with the fact that men can do this too. And it goes into the polyvagal theory, appeasement to maintain safety. So when we see content online of women being harassed by someone, and a lot of the comment sections are full of like predominantly men because they don't get it, saying, why is she smiling? Why is she being agreeable? Like, why didn't she just whack him and run away? When actually, you need to accept the baseline fact that a lot of the time, women are not the physically stronger in the dynamic. So the only thing they can do is kind of just be agreeable and kind of hope that eventually the situation will dissolve and they will get their chance to escape. And there's even this really famous content creator called Vlad, and he pretends to be a girl, and some of the content he makes is he will go out dressed up as a really pretty girl, obviously like a bit like, you know, more broad because he's quite strong, but he was met with a really buff, strong guy who thought that he was a girl. And normally the way that he makes his content is by revealing he's a man and going, haha, I'm a man actually. And most men run off and they're like too scared to face him. But this guy in this video that I saw was huge. He would have knocked him out, even though he himself was a strong guy. To which he turned around and went, yeah, I get why being agreeable works, because it allows you to escape the situation before it reaches a point where you essentially can't escape. And so it is, again, this appeasement to maintain safety. And unless you've been in a situation where the only survival instinct you have is to be nice and to hope that things dissolve, I don't know if you're ever going to resonate to the point that is currently being made. But yes, but true confidence includes neutral face, calm tone, and direct response. Not aggression, but stability. And of course, in some situations, you can't avoid this, like it is a survival instinct. But, pretend you're in a conversation, it's like a work drinks situation, and someone says something inappropriate. Normally, I would have turned around in the past and gone, now I just death stare. I literally just direct and go, mm hmm. And I think they realize at that point it's not okay to say certain things. But again, you just need to figure out what's good for you. But I felt like this was a good point to raise because when you are more secure in yourself and you're not living to try and be agreeable to everyone's taste, you are more secure in having these uncomfortable, not smoothing things over gestures. You just go, okay, and why did you do that? And most of the time that's done with silence slash non response rather than going. So, yeah. But it's a subtle thing, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Confident people do not romanticize potential. Now, this one I am so, so, so guilty of, beyond guilty to the point that I have nothing else to do apart from own it and just be very honest about it. I, more times than not, have romanticized potential over the reality to the point that you accept why people do it, but you also realize why it needs to stop. And true confidence is when you cut that line like a hot knife in butter. Yeah, that's the metaphor. Like a hot knife in butter. You go, whoosh. I briefly talked about my last situationship here. Obviously, nothing happened between him and I, but I very much fell for his potential. And then the reality of his behavior was very disappointing. But equally, my exes were like this as well. I think the only ex I dated where there wasn't this game of potential was my first boyfriend. We very much just met each other at our levels. We didn't overthink anything and we just went with the flow. But even then, towards the end of the relationship, when I felt that things weren't working, I was staying because I thought, oh, the potential of our life together, the potential, the potential. Drop the potential. We don't need to talk about potential. Forget potential. Have a look at what he is doing right now. You need to get out of this fantasy la la land and you need to accept that reality is your golden ticket. You need to look at where someone is meeting you right now. And we don't do that enough. And there's not enough people going online. Stop doing the potential thing and look at where we are now. I also feel this leads into confusing intensity with depth and investing in imagined futures instead of present behavior. So I very much stayed with my ex and kind of let the whole toxicity dynamic play out way longer than it should have because I kept telling myself one day things are going to get better. One day he's going to reach his full potential. One day, one day. When you wake up one day and realize that one day is never going to come, whoo, you are freed from so much heartache, so much chaos, and it just the weight of your off the shoulder is just you cannot describe it unless you've gone through it. But yes, and the psychology behind it is obviously projection, trauma bonding, idealization phase in attachment cycles, variable reward systems in toxic dynamics. Confidence equals pattern recognition. You choose reality over hope. And this is so important because so many people are suffering these toxic dynamics. There's a lot of abuse in today's day and age. It's very scary. The statistics in relationship dissatisfaction as well. And obviously, there are a lot of factors that are going into all of these statistics, not just one thing. But I think what would really help people from an early stage is to intervene with themselves and go, am I falling for the reality of who they are, or is it the potential? And men and women are guilty of this. This is not something that is exclusive to a certain group in society. We all do this. And a lot of the time, this extends to every aspect of our life, whether it's like family relationships, romantic relationships, jobs, locations. I've got one friend that completely romanticized the city because they would only ever visit it as a tourist. They moved there for a little bit, realized, I don't like living here. And again, it's that idea of fantasy versus reality, and we need to break free from that as early as possible. We live in a very digital era, so not performing online for validation. I want to again caveat this with everyone's entitled to post what they want, but I'm very much a believer in accepting the fact that social media is more like an art exhibition rather than people's reality, because no one's posting their 24/7 content of when they go to the bathroom, when they're brushing their teeth, and I'm sure this content exists somewhere on the internet, but it shouldn't be everyone's 24/7 posting. That's a bit strange. Like, you need to be in reality enjoying your life. But then when people do share things, it's more about, oh, I really enjoyed X, Y, and Z moments. I really want to share this with my friends, family, whoever I'm connected to online. But, posting strategically to trigger reactions is not healthy. Editing personality for approval, not healthy. And measuring worth by engagement, also not healthy. But all of them are contributing to the fact that someone is not confident. And psychologically speaking, self comparison theory, dopamine feedback loops, externalized self esteem. And obviously, we spoke about externalized self esteem earlier, but it was just an extra point to use here. Confident people don't use platforms for self worth, they use it as a form of expression. And this was important to mention because we live in such a digital era. I don't think we need to talk about it for too long, but it was a worthy mention. This is so important. Confident people do not abandon themselves in order to keep the peace. So this obviously is something that a lot of people do when they're going through toxicity, or they want to maintain the peace in the workplace, or they want to just make sure they're not going to force an uncomfortable situation to come to fruition. But in actual fact, you're saying yes when you're exhausted. You're tolerating disrespect in order to avoid conflict. You're dimming intelligence to avoid intimidating others. And these things I've been guilty of in one way or another, whether it was a toxic relationship, whether it was a toxic workplace, whether it was just a case of meeting people and not wanting to seem intimidating. I remember one of my friends said we had a mutual friend who found my eye contact very intimidating. And if you ever meet me in real life and become friends with me in real life, you'll realize that I have very strong eye contact. It's something I've done from day one. I've always found it very telling about someone, their intentions, and just connecting to them in conversation and showing them that I'm engaged by literally staring into their eyes. And for me, I feel like I'm really seeing and hearing the individual, and the rest of the room shuts off when I connect through the eyes. And it's just something that is very natural to me. But we had a mutual friend that said that she found that extremely intimidating. So when we did eventually reunite as a group, I found myself trying not to look at her, and it was very unnatural for me because I kept going, and I felt like I was dimming who I was as an individual, to the point that I just got so tired in the conversation. I was like, I'm just going to relax and stare straight into her soul, as I do. And afterwards, she reported back to the friend that she was actually fine with me. And when I was staring her in the face, she was completely okay. But I think it's one of those things that, yeah, tolerating disrespect to avoid conflict. I did that in the workplace. There was a lot of questionable behavior from some superior figures in my old job. And I was sort of laying low and quiet about it, even though I could see it clear as day, just to avoid having uncomfortable conversations, just to avoid the conflict. And eventually, the outcome that I expected did happen. But when the uncomfortable conversations did happen, I was a lot more secure in myself than I thought I'd be. That I realized that I hadn't reached the full confidence of my potential confidence because I was scared to do that, when I should have just called it out for what it was at the time I noticed it. And of course, that leads into saying yes when you're exhausted. And this is transferable again to every aspect of your life. You could say yes when you're exhausted to extra jobs, to things in a relationship, whatever it may be. But there's an element where you should know your worth and your limits and go, actually, I can't do this. And I saw this one TikTok of this girl. She said something so amazing. When someone in her job asked her to do something that was beyond her role, she was like, if you want to give me a promotion and you want to give me a pay raise, which lines up with these extra tasks you want to offer me, then I'm happy to have that discussion. Let me know when to book it in. But that currently does not fall into my job description. Bingo. And if you can get it on email, even better, because obviously, if you've got an actual in written trail, that's the best way to do things. But I just thought that was spectacular. It was amazing work. And I think all of those points just go to the fact that confidence is not self abandonment, it's self loyalty. Like, a deeper layer that I wrote and I felt was important to talk about was that confidence very much is behavioral because it grows from acting in alignment, surviving disapproval, repeating that survival. Each time you don't over explain, don't chase reassurance, don't shrink, your brain updates its self concept. Your neuroplasticity works in your favor. Confidence is evidence accumulation. And, it's just not affirmations and kind of trying to brainwash yourself, which they're all important in their own sense. Like, I feel affirmations and practicing self love, they're all very good. But when you take that a step further and you practice it in real life through the above mentioned things, you're really solidifying to yourself that actually I am confident. I like who I am as an individual and I'm protecting that individual. Confidence is not about becoming louder, it's about becoming less negotiable with yourself. The more self loyal you become, the less convincing anyone of anything you have to do. You truly accept yourself for who you are as you are, and that is true confidence. Sneak peek to behind the scenes. This is how I film everything. Hola. Oh my goodness.